Hey y'all! Welcome to the channel and to the review of a Technics 100C turntable. And I'll give you a little history on my experience with different turntables, which isn't vast, but you know, I've used them for a while, since the 1970s anyway. And previously I had a Technics SLB2, which is your basic belt drive semi-automatic turntable. And it was really a great turntable for a long time. It's the kind that has the little strobe that flashes on the edge of the platter to show you the speed. It's got the plus or minus little potentiometer to dial in the speed, and then, you know, basic tone arm, S-shaped tone arm. Didn't have a real fancy cantilever thing. Had anti-skate and the adjustable weight with the, you know, normal detachable head shell. Now, at one point I did play with one of the P cartridge ones and was not impressed. Never was able to find a cartridge that I liked, and it seemed very limiting. I mean, they were designed obviously to be super user simple, where you just pop out a cartridge and pop in another one when the needle gets old and you don't have to adjust anything or whatever, but definitely wasn't hi-fi, and I never really got it to sound decent. And so, again, SLB2 was a nice one. I did play with a music hall MF7, I think it was. I know it was a 7 version. It had the separate little motor, and it was just kind of finicky. It had the little fishing line with the weight for the anti-skate, and I don't even think that was adjustable. It was just there. And then, you know, it had the belt that went around the motor, and the problem I had with it was there was no speed adjustment on it. And when I put one of the little strobe pattern things on the, you know, platter and then shine the light on it, the speed was slow, and you could hear it. It wasn't way off, but it was off, and there's no speed adjustment. And then I looked online, and it's like, oh yeah, well, you can buy this little speed adjuster thing, and it's another $400 and or something ridiculous. And the turntable was a used one. I'll, you know, say that it wasn't a brand new one. So I don't know how many hours it had on it to get to this point where the speed was slow. And I don't know if the motor, you know, I tried putting some lube on the bushings, and that didn't seem to change the speed any. And so, you know, I ended up returning it to the guy, and he was fine with it. He just, you know, hey, if you don't like it, you don't like it. And the other thing I didn't like was the head shell wasn't removable. It was, you know, kind of, the end of the tone arm was kind of just smooshed down and then was fabricated up to hold the cartridge. And I didn't like that you couldn't swap cartridges out if you wanted to try a different sound. So I've been living with that old Technics and was wanting to upgrade my vinyl playback game. And so the first thing I tried was moving coil cartridge. Everybody's talking about how great they are. And so I bought this fairly high-end, or to me it was high-end, it was a $600 moving coil AT cartridge. And then I spent another $400 getting a step-up transformer box so I could use it with my moving magnet phono stage, which is a tube one. And while it was an improvement, it wasn't earth-shattering, and that was like $1,000 I dropped. And so I was thinking, you know, heard the old saying, don't put more money in the cartridge than the turntable is. And given this was kind of a mid-level turntable in its day, I decided, hey, let's step up and get a nicer turntable. And the other thing I noticed was, if the strobe thing was accurate, I never could get the speed to just be stable. It would always do this little drift and back and forth thing. It wasn't a lot. I didn't really notice it audibly, but it kind of bothered me that it didn't just sit there, that it was like floating back and forth across the speed. No matter, you know, you could move the adjuster and it would move this way and that way. You could get it pretty stable, but it was not just nailed down. So I know this Technics direct drive technology is very mature. They've been doing it a long time. There are a couple of features I wish this turntable had, but it doesn't. So, you know, trying to think on hindsight, should I have gotten the 1200 DJ turntable, or was this the right move? And one of the reasons that I bought this turntable was the auto lift feature that it advertises having. And I have to say, I am super, super disappointed on how poorly that was done. For somebody that knows turntables like Technics does, why they would design this thing so that the auto lift thing sits dragging in the end of the track for over a minute before it lifts the tone arm, I just don't understand it. I mean, my almost 50-year-old turntable, when the tone arm got to the end of the record, it would lift it up and actually return it, park it, and shut off. And I was hoping this one would, at least like when it got to the end, it'd lift up the tone arm so the needle's not dragging at the end of the record. And it sits there for at least a minute before it goes, oh, yeah, the record's over, and it lifts it. And don't buy this turntable for that feature. I end up just turning it off, and it's a manual turntable for all intent and purposes. That feature's worthless. And I'm really, I'm disappointed that they would even consider that as being a feature, or why they have it sit at the end of the record for a minute before it does anything. Or, I don't know how it's implemented, why it can't sense. I mean, it seems like they could put some kind of optical sensor on the tone arm or something, that, or a micro switch at the end of it or something where it would be able to sense it was at the end of the record better than it does. So the other features that I wish this had is they really should have put the little pop-up light thing that the DJ turntables have. My turntable's sitting in a place where, at night when I'm listening to music, can't really see the record, and it would be nice to be able to have, some sort of a little pop-up light to cue, and then you could turn it off. And I guess they did it to keep the deck nice and clean, which I appreciate that fact, but, that's something I think they missed opportunity, at least to have one version of these that has the little pop-up light. So instead I have a little LED light sitting over the side to have to turn on, which isn't the end of the world. And it does look nice and clean like this. The other thing that this doesn't have is the little strobe thing. And at first I was kind of like, I kind of wish it had that. I like being able to verify it. But at the end of the day, you either trust this technology or you don't. And there's no adjustment up here. And I kind of like that there's no adjustment and that it just runs at the right speed. And so not having a strobe, it's kind of nice to not have that little light up there anyway. So anyway, those are a couple of things. Main thing is this auto lift thing is just a joke. I'm super disappointed in that. The others would have just been a nice to have, especially the little light. But hey, I can live without that. So let's go on to the things I do like. I do like that it has hinges and that the cover lifts up and can close. Got a dog. Don't know if she's going to walk through today or not, Dolly. And so there's dog hair and dander and stuff all in my house. And so it's really nice to just be able to close the cover and not have to worry about dust and dog hair and stuff getting on records while I'm playing them. Because some of them have like the set in place cover, and to me that would be pretty difficult to like put them in place while the record's playing and not risk, hitting the end of the tone arm with the cover and doing some bad stuff. And so I do really like the fact that it has this tilt-up cover and it comes off pretty easily. So again, it's got the detachable head shell. I like these Yamamoto wood head shells. I've been using them for a while. And so there's probably nothing wrong with the ones that comes with. There's nothing about this feature-wise, but I just like the idea of there being wood between the metal tone arm and the cartridge to help damp out any resonance that might happen. Okay, so let's go over the things I do like about it. Nice, super heavy platter. Thing comes up to speed almost instantly. It's got 33, 45. The nice thing about this too, I've got some 45 LPs, and or the big 45s, and when I switch to 45, I don't have to, mess around with the speed control like I used to on my old one. When you switch from 33 to 45, you'd have to play with the little potentiometer and set the speed again. Don't have to mess with this at all. It's also, like I said, just got this start stop button and makes it super simple. It defaults to 33, hit the start button, and you go. I use a little weight here in the center. This isn't anything fancy. It's a little Hudson Hi-Fi weight, which I think helps a little bit. Not absolutely necessary, obviously. The things that this has that my other turntable didn't, the main one is it's got a VTA adjustment, or the height adjustment of the rear of the tone arm. Now, I've heard people say they don't like that the way it just kind of locks and then you manually move it up and down. In use, guys, it's not a big deal. I mean, I don't really need this thing to like dial, spin up and down. You don't mess with it that often. Most of the cartridges that I'm using, or all the ones I'm using, have pretty much the same needle to head shell height, and so this is a set it once and not mess with it again. Got your anti-skating adjustment here. It's got obviously this, classic Technics tone arm that's tried and true. This is like a bulletproof tone arm, and I guess that's the whole deal with this whole turntable, is this thing's going to last a long time. This is proven technology. Know it's going to work great. I like that the feet are individually adjustable, so you can, get it nice and level without a bunch of hassle. Trying to think of the other, features. The main thing, like I said, is this VTA adjustment that my old turntable didn't have, and I didn't realize how much difference that makes in the sonic qualities. So now let's get into setting this thing up. It comes with this little AT cartridge. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but it's a decent little cartridge. The needle that comes in it is junk. Just don't even bother. And I'll go over the options on the different cartridges and the advantages and disadvantages of them. Okay, so the cheapest way to get this sounding decent is to buy this little orange colored, I think that's the elliptical needle, and it makes a ginormous difference in the way this cartridge sounds. Upgrading to this needle is definitely a pathway to good sound, the cheapest way possible. But there's an issue with that, and I'll get into that in a minute. My preferred cartridge is this VM540ML. It's a microline AT cartridge. Mounts in the stock head shell, or any of the standard kind of head shells, and you can definitely get it set up without having to go to any kind of drastic measures. Finally, there are the moving coil cartridges, which is like the next kind of level up. This is the OC9 MXL, I think it is, the microline moving coil cartridge, and got it in a lightweight head shell, and it definitely sounds nice too. But I'm not sure that there's that huge a jump between this and that. It's there, but it's not ginormous like putting a good needle in this cartridge is. So the other thing that I ran into was how to set this thing up. And they give you a measurement from the mounting point of the head shell to the needle, and they actually even make a little tool for aligning it, which makes it simple. And that's the Techniques kind of standard. And if you use that measurement, you set the cartridge perfectly square in the head shell, and you're done. That's kind of the simple down and dirty way of doing it. But I found from experimentation that using this bare-walled arc protractor, which you can download them off the Vinyl Engine, I'll put the link in the description, it definitely improved the bass response that I was getting out of these cartridges. That was the main thing that I noticed. And it's not complicated to do for most cartridges, but it didn't work well with the one this turntable comes with, and I'll explain why in a minute. So you download this little deal, and it's got this little arc here. I don't know if you probably can't see this, but there's a mark here, and there's a mark here, and you want to move the cartridge forward and back in the head shell, and you're going to be moving it forward almost to the end of the slots, so that the needle touches here, there, and even over here, and it follows this line as the arc, with, obviously without the platter turning. Then there's two spots here that you put the needle on, and then you get the side of the cartridge, and actually you try to get the cantilever of the cartridge aligned with this little grid pattern, which means you're going to toe it inwards towards the spindle just a little bit. Now, you want to hold up the cartridge and make sure that the stylus is straight and that it's not to one side or the other. If it's to one side or the other a little bit, because there are manufacturing tolerances, it's not a big deal. Just take that into consideration when you're setting the head shell angle versus this little grid pattern. So, like I said, with this 540 ml, you have to move the cartridge to the very end of the slots or almost, and then twist it just a little bit in. But it will work because there's enough difference between these screw holes and the needle. There's enough overhang there that it'll work with the stock head shell. With this needle, there wasn't enough overhang from the screw holes to the needle. And so I had to get a head shell that had longer slots that moved the cartridge further out from the tone arm pivot to get it to match that arc. So now you're buying not just a needle, but you're also having to buy a different head shell, which these ones that have longer slots aren't going to be cheap. And it's hard to find lightweight ones either. This one was so heavy, I had to come in here and drill a bunch of holes in it to try to lighten it up some, so it was even close to being, usable with this cartridge and this tone arm. So if you're going to do this deal, take that into consideration, that this stock cartridge isn't going to work with the stock head shell, and you're going to have to buy a head shell and a needle. Then you're coming up to the same price as what just getting a VM540ml will cost. And it's just a great sounding moving magnet cartridge. The nice thing about moving magnets too, if you need to, you can replace the stylus, even though the stylus is about the cost of a new cartridge. And I don't know whether that even makes sense to spend $200 on a stylus when you can buy the whole cartridge for $250, unless you just don't want to mess with like resetting it up. So anyway, that would be my recommendation, is to use this VM540ml. You could use a stock head shell if you want. Like I said, I like these wood ones. Nothing else, they look cool. And then if you've got a preamp that works with moving coil, you might consider a moving coil cartridge. At least it's something different to listen to, because this and this do sound different. This has got a little more top end kind of sparkle than this one does. And I'm actually glad I did this, because this cartridge is a little more neutral sounding than this one is. And so I've got some options if the mastering on the vinyl is a little hot. I can do this. If it's a really detail oriented kind of vinyl, we'll put this moving coil one in. But for average listening, this one works great. And that's kind of it. I think this is a really nice turntable for the price point. These things were right at $1,000. I think it might have been $1,100 with, all in. And it's nice and heavy. You can tell it's built well. And I think it's a really good value for a turntable in this marketplace. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed my review and setup here. If you do, check out some of my other videos. A lot of it's about tube amp gear. Some of it's about DIY speakers. I'm kind of venturing off into different subject matter. So subscribe if you've enjoyed this. Please like the video. Thanks to you Patreon folks, as well as folks that give us donations to the channel to help the stuff keep rolling. And until the next time, have a nice day.